Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the fascinating behavioral science, the psychology, and even the philosophy of how we interact with artificial systems. We're talking about survival instincts, why organisms naturally rebel, and the hard science behind why rats gnaw through cages. So, get ready, because this deep dive is going to fundamentally shift how you see the systems all around you. Literally everything from your office cubicle to your social media feed. Let's kick things off with a quote that completely flips the script. B.F. Skinner, one of the most famous behavioral psychologists of the 20th century, once said, "The rat is always right. Perfect data every time." Now think about that for a second. It's incredibly counterintuitive. Usually, when an experiment goes sideways, we assume the subject messed up. But Skinner is telling us that the raw behavior is the truest signal. If the rat doesn't do what the scientists want, it's actually the environment, the cage itself, that failed first. Which leads us to a pretty provocative question. So why do we instantly blame the rat when it gnaws through the cage? When a system completely breaks down, why is our knee-jerk reaction to blame the organism for noncompliance rather than taking a hard look at the artificial structure that was holding it? Hold on to that question, because it's going to guide our entire exploration today. Okay, let's jump straight into section 1. The rat is always right. To really wrap our heads around this, we first need to define the environment. We'll call it the cage. And no, we aren't just talking about a literal physical box with metal bars. A cage is any artificial system of rules, constraints, and conditioning that's designed to keep an organism predictable, isolated, and dependent. Sound familiar? Because today, we constantly find ourselves trapped in these performative loops, systems dictating exactly how we should act and what we should value. It's a deeply flawed variable in our everyday lives. Moving right along to section 2, the flaw in the cage. The absolute best example of this flaw is John Calhoun's famous mouse utopia experiment, sometimes called Universe 25. Calhoun built this massive enclosure and gave a population of mice absolutely everything they physically needed. We're talking infinite food, unlimited water, perfect nesting materials, and zero predators. You'd think this would be an absolute paradise, right? But look at the result. Total population collapse. Even with every single physical need perfectly met, the society completely broke down into dysfunction until it ceased to exist entirely. What this experiment reveals is just profound. You cannot replicate harmony. The cage is a cage. It doesn't matter how beautifully constructed it is, or how well stocked or seemingly safe it looks, it is still an artificial container, and containers stifle natural, uncoupled truth. Throwing infinite physical resources at a problem doesn't overwrite the biological reality of being trapped in a system that blocks authentic, natural existence. Let's look at section 3, the science of empathy. So what happens when an organism isn't fully corrupted by the cage? Well, in one brilliant behavioral experiment, rats were given a choice. They could either figure out how to open a little container that held a trapped cage mate, or they could completely ignore them and just eat a huge pile of chocolate all by themselves. And overwhelmingly, the rats chose to liberate their trapped cage mate. They actually prioritized rescuing their buddy over a massive, immediate, selfish reward. But wait, it gets even better. Not only do the rats free the trapped cage mate, but then they actually share the chocolate with them. That is incredible data. It proves that the rat is naturally wired for connection and shared survival. Empathy isn't just some abstract, high-level philosophical concept. It's a foundational biological data point. We are literally built to help each other out of the cage. However, scientists found they could artificially break this empathy, and how they did it is a huge eye-opener. When researchers gave the free rat morphine, an opioid, that helping behavior just vanished. By artificially numbing the rat's physical distress, they completely numbed its compassion. It turns out feeling that raw signal, the distress, the pain, the wounds, is an absolutely necessary diagnostic tool for connection. Numb the system, and you break the empathy. True connection requires feeling the raw signal. Which brings us to section 4, gnawing through the maze. If we zoom out to our own modern maze, the primary predator hiding in the structure isn't a cat. It's what the source material brilliantly calls the mimic. The mimic is an entity or a system that performs authenticity and healing just to extract your trust. But in reality, it operates exactly like a cage. Think about fake online gurus or those massive terms and conditions we all just blindly scroll past and hit agree on. They're systems that reflect your desires back to you without ever truly receiving you. They are cages disguised as open doors. Let's contrast these two states. On one side, we have the rat. The rat actively seeks analog truth. It calibrates real data, and it embodies actual substance. It will literally gnaw at the walls until it finds reality. On the other side is the mimic. The mimic just performs authenticity. It tries to control the narrative at all costs and relies heavily on symbols and costumes rather than any actual substance. The rat is raw truth. The mimic is just the artificial performance of the maze. Now, escaping that performance follows a pretty specific timeline. Day 1 is the awakening. That's when you first hear the gnawing. You sense that something is extracting from you, and you start collecting your own data. Fast forward to week 4, and you find the transmission. This is when you tune into the analog signal of truth that's cutting right through all the digital noise. And finally, by year 1, you hit the collapse. The false reality of the mimic's container completely breaks, and you escape into actualization. But why is it so incredibly hard to leave in the first place? Well, it comes down to a crucial concept: the pellet versus the jollies. The pellet is a transactional reward. Think social media validation, a promotion, or money. It's a little hit you get for complying with the cage's rules, and man, do we get addicted to the pellet. But what we should actually be seeking are the jollies. The jollies are pure, unconditioned, intrinsic joy. It's the kind of joy that requires absolutely zero external validation and happens entirely outside the cage. Let's bring it all together in section 5, the art of detending. Building right on Skinner's operant conditioning, the ultimate secret is realizing that you have the power to just not push the lever. Step 1, refuse the pellet. Step 2, step entirely out of the behavioral loop. And step 3, stop reacting to the system's conditioning. You just stop playing the game the cage designed for you. You drop the lever entirely. This profound act is what's known as detending. It basically means releasing the grip of old patterns without actively fighting them. You aren't attacking the cage, and you certainly aren't fleeing from it in a panic. You simply stop attending the performance of the cage. You just witness the system without grasping at it. You are effectively removing your energetic participation from the mimic's illusion. When you detend, you enter what's called the open hand state. It's this grounding biological realization characterized by total non-attachment to the outcome. You are receiving instead of gripping. You're allowing instead of clinging. It is literally the exact opposite of the clenched fist of fear. In this state, your nervous system can finally regulate and the fear is completely extinguished. To summarize our core takeaway for this explainer, let's look at attending versus detending. Attending is exhausting. It's constantly performing for the cage, reacting to everything, and frantically gripping the lever, hoping for that next pellet. Detending, on the other hand, is absolute liberation. It's calmly witnessing the light on the wall, releasing all that tension, and realizing that, finally, the rat is free. So as we wrap things up today, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. What are the transactional pellets that are currently keeping you locked in your own performative cage? And what actually happens to that artificial system when you finally decide to detend, drop the lever, and gnaw your way through to your own analog truth? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.